All right, hey everyone. So picture this. You're sitting at a high-stakes poker table, right? And the rules keep changing like mid-hand.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what South Africa is dealing with right now in the global economy.
Oh, yeah.
Especially with former President Trump back in the picture, throwing out some pretty serious threats against the BRICS nations.
It's a fascinating dynamic. It really exposes, I think, some of the weaknesses in the current world order and how those tensions play out in nations like South Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe let's do like a quick recap for anyone who, hasn't been following every twist and turn in global economics.
Sure.
BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Right.
They've actually expanded to include some new members, right?
I have, yeah.
Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the UAE.
Yep.
So this block is, they're making waves.
Definitely.
And not everyone is thrilled about it.
No, it's definitely a challenge to what has been the traditional Western-led economic order.
Right.
And their combined economic might, the fact that they're looking to reduce their reliance on the U.S. dollar, it's made things pretty tense.
It has, yeah. And that's kind of where this whole Trump tariff threat comes into play, right?
Yeah.
He's basically saying, hey, any BRICS nation that backs a new currency to kind of rival the dollar, they're going to get slapped with 100% tariff.
Right.
On everything.
It's huge. And it's got South Africa in a really tough spot.
Yeah. Walking a tightrope.
Absolutely.
So I think what we want to do today is really dive into what could happen. What's at stake here?
Yeah.
For South Africa and for the U.S. and kind of explore, what are the bigger picture implications of this whole economic tug of war?
Yeah. It's a complex situation for sure. Lots of moving parts.
Oh, yeah.
But at its core, we're looking at what happens when, the economic superpower of the world feels its dominance slipping away a little.
Right. And this isn't Trump's first time, playing the tariff card, right? We saw what happened with China, with Mexico, even with Canada during his first term.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So is this just like a bluff, a negotiating tactic, or is this the real deal this time?
Well, I mean, we have to consider the facts.
Yeah.
When a tariff's imposed, it doesn't just impact the country exporting, it also impacts the people importing it and the consumers, particularly in this case, consumers in the U.S.
Yeah.
Right. So take South Africa, for example. If that 100% tariff hits their exports, think about the price of, South African wine or cars sold here in the U.S. Those prices would just skyrocket.
Yeah, seriously. Imagine walking into your favorite wine shop and that bottle of Pinotage you always get is suddenly twice the price.
Right. And that's a great example of how this could actually really increase inflation and impact, the everyday person here.
Mm-hmm.
And things are already kind of tough economically, right?
Absolutely. And then on the other side, you've got South Africa, which, really relies on trade with the U.S.
Yeah.
Especially through AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act.
Right, right. And AGOA has been huge, especially for industries like cars, agriculture, metals. It's created so many jobs. Losing that would be, devastating to their economy.
So it's like they're stuck. They're really between a rock and a hard place.
Right.
Because, supporting this new BRICS currency, that could really damage their relationship with their biggest trading partner, the U.S.
For sure.
But if they don't support it, then they could miss out on, some potentially huge benefits.
Yeah.
And maybe even anger their BRICS allies.
Right. It's a balancing act. And they're aware of the potential consequences of each path. But at the end of the day, their primary responsibility is to the people of South Africa and their well-being.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in all this global chess game stuff, but it really comes down to real people's lives.
Exactly.
In South Africa, in the United States.
Yep. And that's what makes it so fascinating.
Yeah.
You have to look beyond, this abstract idea of currencies and trade wars and think about the human cost of these global power plays.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's interesting when you look back historically, reserve currencies, they've come and gone throughout history as empires rise and fall. You look at the British pound, for example.
Yeah.
It was the dominant global currency for a long time.
Yeah.
And then, the U.S. kind of rose to power.
Yeah.
And it eventually lost that supremacy.
So are you saying the dollar, its dominance isn't a given? It's happened before, it could happen again.
Yeah. That's exactly what BRICS is betting on, right? They see the dollar, they see its power kind of waning, especially with countries like China and Russia gaining more economic clout.
Right.
They're challenging the, existing order.
Yeah. And so for them, this whole BRICS-backed currency, that's, that's bigger than just economics, right?
Sure.
Like,
Right.
that's a statement.
It is.
It's like saying, hey, we're here, we're powerful, and we're not playing by your rules anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a direct challenge to, the U.S.'s dominance, both economically and politically.
Right.
And that's why everything is so tense right now.
Yeah.
The U.S. is fighting to stay on top.
Yeah.
While BRICS is, like, literally trying to build a new pyramid.
Yeah.
One where they have, a much bigger say.
Right. Okay. So let's break this down a bit. Okay. First, for South Africa, what does this actually mean for them? Like, on the ground, if they go with BRICS, this new currency takes off.
Well, there are some potential upsides.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Increased trade with other BRICS nations. Those are some of the fastest growing economies in the world.
Yeah.
So imagine South African businesses. Suddenly, they have easier access to these huge markets in China, India, Brazil.
Yeah.
And without having to, deal with the dollar and its ups and downs.
That sounds pretty good, especially if they're maybe losing trade with the U.S. anyway because of the tariffs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not without risk. Let's be real. For a new currency to succeed, it needs to be stable, it needs to be trusted, and it needs to be accepted, all over the world.
Yeah.
So if the BRICS currency fails to gain traction, or if it's just, poorly managed, it could really destabilize South Africa's economy.
Right.
It can make it a lot harder for them to do business globally.
So it's a gamble?
It is.
But then again, sticking with what we have now, that could be a gamble too.
Wow,
right?
absolutely.
Especially if the U.S. keeps going down this road with, the economic isolationism.
Right.
These aggressive trade tactics.
It's a real dilemma, and there are no easy answers.
Yeah.
South Africa is basically being asked to choose between two uncertain futures, each with their own rewards and risks.
And, it's important to remember that they're not making this decision in a vacuum.
No, absolutely not.
There's this whole geopolitical landscape.
Right.
The relationships with other African nations.
Right.
Domestic politics. It's all connected.
Yeah, absolutely. It's this web of interconnected factors, and the stakes are incredibly high.
Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit.
Okay.
And talk about the U.S.
Okay.
We've touched on how tariffs could hurt American consumers.
Right.
But, zoom out a bit. What happens to the U.S. economy if the dollar starts to lose its grip as the world's top currency?
Ooh, that's the question that, keeps policymakers up at night.
Yeah.
For decades, the dollar being the world's reserve currency has given the U.S. this huge economic advantage.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Other countries need dollars to trade internationally, which creates demand for U.S. debt and keeps interest rates low.
So if that changes, if the dollar's not as strong, the U.S. loses that edge.
They do. Exactly.
Yeah.
Which could lead to higher interest rates, which makes it harder for the U.S. government to borrow money. And it could weaken the U.S.'s ability to influence global financial markets.
Yeah.
And, even things like imposing economic sanctions.
Yeah.
Which are a big part of U.S. foreign policy.
So it's almost like the U.S. is also making a gamble.
Yeah.
Betting that they can just hold on to this power.
Right.
Through, basically willpower and kind of aggressive moves like these tariff threats.
Yeah.
But what if that backfires?
Yeah. Yeah.
What if this just pushes countries away from the dollar faster?
Yeah.
And they just create their own systems?
That's the big question mark.
Yeah.
No one really knows for sure how this is all going to play out. But one thing is clear, I think. The global economy is changing.
Yeah.
And the old rules, they might not work anymore.
So, okay, we've got South Africa. They're in the middle of this, right?
Yeah.
Facing this really tough choice.
Yeah.
Huge consequences for their future.
Absolutely.
And we've got the U.S. They're trying to hold on to their position, but it seems like they're pushing countries away instead of pulling them closer.
Yeah, it's almost like a classic case of unintended consequences,
Yeah.
The very actions that they're taking to preserve their power might end up, kind of backfiring.
Right.
And for South Africa, the challenge is to find a way to navigate all of this,
Right.
to find a path that leads to, prosperity and stability for their people.
It feels really precarious. We're at this, tipping point.
Yeah, it does.
So what happens next? Where do we go from here?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? And, no one has a crystal ball.
Right.
But I think we can kind of look at some possibilities,
Yeah.
analyze what's happening. I think the next couple of years will be pretty key, especially with the G20 summit coming up
Oh, yeah.
in Johannesburg in 2025.
Right, the G20. Yeah. That's where, like, all the big economies get together.
Right? Exactly.
And it kind of feels like that's going to be a showdown, right?
It could be, yeah.
Between the U.S. and BRICS.
It really has the potential to be, kind of a defining moment in this whole thing.
Yeah.
Imagine Trump back in the White House using that platform, the G20,
Yeah.
to deliver an ultimatum
Oh, wow.
to South Africa and any other BRICS members who are, maybe on the fence. Choose the dollar or face the consequences.
It's like, it's like a movie, right?
It is. It's high stakes.
So much tension, global implications.
Absolutely.
But okay, like, beyond the drama,
Yeah.
what would actually happen?
Right.
Like, realistically, if things went that way.
Well, for South Africa, I mean, that would be a nightmare to have to choose between their biggest trading partner and, this bloc that represents a way to, maybe a world that's less centered around the U.S.
Right.
Siding completely with the U.S. I mean, that would probably mean cutting ties with BRICS, which in the long run could limit their economic options. But going against the U.S., I mean, that could trigger a trade war that would just, crush their economy right away.
It's a lose-lose.
It is. And I think it really underscores how vulnerable their position is.
Yeah.
And how this global power struggle is, like, literally at their doorstep.
Absolutely.
And it wouldn't just stop with South Africa, right?
Yeah.
A trade war between the U.S. and BRICS, I mean, that would affect everyone. Global economy would be in chaos. Supply chains would be disrupted. Prices would go crazy. Growth would probably stall. I mean, it would be a massive blow to globalization.
Wow.
And it could honestly lead to a world that's a lot more fractured and unstable.
So, okay, the choose a side thing.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty bad for everyone.
It does.
Is there, like, another way? Like a way out of this?
Well, I think the best case scenario, at least for South Africa, is to somehow not have to choose at all.
Right.
Maybe position themselves as like a bridge between the U.S. and BRICS. Advocate for, talking and working together instead of fighting.
It's a long shot.
Yeah.
But I mean, they do have a history of kind of playing that mediator role.
They do.
So maybe.
You would take some really skillful diplomacy, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And a willingness from both sides, the U.S. and BRICS, to, step back from the edge.
Yeah.
But if it actually worked, it could help create a world that's more balanced, more multipolar, where power is distributed more evenly and where countries like South Africa have more say in, global affairs.
So what you're saying is there's still hope.
Yeah.
But, it's going to take some serious courage.
Yeah.
Some really strategic thinking and maybe a little bit of luck for South Africa to, like, actually navigate this and kind of come out okay on the other side.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. And that's why this is so interesting to watch.
Yeah.
We're seeing this huge shift in the global balance of power, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the choices that countries like South Africa make, they're going to have ripple effects everywhere.
They really will. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. Trump's terror threats, this potential BRICS currency, the tightrope walk that South Africa is doing.
Yeah, a lot going on.
It's a complicated story, and it's changing all the time.
It is.
But I think it really shows just how connected everything is.
Right? It does.
And how global events, they really affect everyone.
Yeah. I think it's a really important reminder that we're living in this time of, so much change and uncertainty. The old rules are being questioned and the future is, it's up in the air. But in all of this, this chaos, there's also a chance to build something better. A world that's more just, more equitable, and more sustainable. A world where every country has a voice.
Yeah.
And where the needs of everyone matter, not just a select few.
Yes, that's a powerful thought.
It is.
And as we keep, diving deep into these forces that are shaping the world, we just encourage everyone listening to stay curious, stay informed, stay engaged, because in a world where, like, the only constant is change, knowledge really is power. So until next time, everyone, happy diving.